I don't know if you're anything like me, but you read all day long. I mean, you get on the internet, and if you're looking at some of the same articles I am, you read all day long about the fact that people are against scope creep. They characterize the increase of scope as negative. I want to pause that dynamic for just a second and ask you this question. When you go to a restaurant and you're like, I'd like a salad and then I'd like a meal, and they say, oh, are you going to want dessert with that? And you say no. And you get to the end of the meal, right? And at that point they come back and you're like, excuse me, can I get some dessert? Would you appreciate it if the waiter looked at you and said, what are you talking about? I asked you earlier if you wanted dessert and you said no. So because you said no, there's no dessert for you. I don't know if you're anything like me, but those may be the saddest words I've ever heard. No dessert for you. No way. No waiter in their right mind is going to do that. And yet, as freelancers, as software engineers, as developers, it doesn't matter what context you're in. I tend to find that most of us react that way to customers when they say, I'd like to do this or I'd like to change this. What about this? Let's turn it on its heel a bit and talk about a different part of the ordering process when you're at a restaurant. When you're at the restaurant and the waiter comes to ask you what you want. Have you ever done this? Probably not. Probably not you, but maybe you have some friends that have done this. They ask you what you want and you say, well, I'd like this fish, except I don't want this sauce on it. And I see that it comes with rice and vegetables, but is there a way to get rid of the rice? Get me mashed potatoes, and can I get double mashed potatoes and no vegetables? Does that ever happen? And do you expect the waiter at that point to be like, no, you can't do that. All the food is exactly as it's printed out and that's all it is, or else be gone from my restaurant. It never happens. And it doesn't happen because it's bad. It's bad service. It's ridiculous. You'd never imagine it. Now here's the thing. I've been at a restaurant where I've heard someone say, I don't want what comes with the steak. I don't want that au poivre sauce. But I see that you have a different sauce with this chicken over here. Can you put that over here? Ever heard anyone do something like that? Where they pick and choose something from somewhere else and add it to something here on their menu, one of the options they're picking from? Because here's what you're doing. You're seeing something else you like and you're saying, can I get it on mine? And you have no idea what it takes to produce that. You don't know if that sauce comes natural byproduct of cooking chicken. And you're not supposed to know. You don't pay attention to that. You're the customer. You ask, is it possible to get this special sauce on my steak instead of that chicken? Is it possible to get these kind of potatoes with my steak instead of my chicken? And no one freaks out when you ask it. In fact, the worst that you ever get is the waiter looks at you and says, I don't know, I'll have to go ask. Or maybe they say, I think we can do it, there may be an extra charge. I want to ask you a question. I want you to think about all the times that you've ever been at a restaurant when someone said, yeah, I can bring you that, there'll be an extra charge. I want to know if you've ever thrown a fit. I want to know if you've ever grabbed the tablecloth and just yanked it up and flipped everything over to say, there's no way, I will not handle this. I will not deal with the fact that you're going to charge me an extra $2 for a special au poivre sauce next to my steak. That is insufferable to me. Ever done it? Ever thrown a fit? Maybe you don't go to a fancy restaurant with steak. Maybe you go to a inexpensive fast food place. Order 6 or 9 chicken McNuggets. Ever ask for a barbecue sauce that's extra than the one they give you? And when they say there'll be an extra charge for that, do you ever throw a fit? Do you take your hand and slide it over the counter and get rid of everything that's there and throw a fit and stomp around and grab the straw container and yank it down? Do you do that when someone says there'll be an extra charge? I'm guessing you don't. You know why you don't? Because it's not unreasonable to get an extra charge for something. There's a natural consequence to that. It's not unreasonable for a waiter to say, you know what, I'm going to have to go check and see if that's even possible. And there may be a charge for it. Yet when we're on the other end of the table, when we're the waiters, and someone comes to us and says, I saw this beautiful thing on this other website, but I like it on mine. Or I saw that you did it on this other project, but I like it on mine. We're like, are you kidding me? Do you even know what that costs? Do you understand the whole budget? Oh my God, you're having a fit. You've lost all control. You don't look human anymore. Do you know that? Do you have friends that are close enough to tell you the honest to God truth that you don't look like a human when you throw a fit about something so simple as there may be an extra charge for that? I can tell you there are customers who are like, well, I don't know what just happened here. I just asked if I could get, Now, if they ask for a slider on the homepage, by all means, you have my approval, just say no, right? Because they suck. But anything else, right? You don't have to throw a fit. You can just say, let me go look into that. Let me check. There may be an extra charge for that. Now, some of you say, well, it's fine, Chris. I've tried that. I've tried to tell people there may be an extra charge and they get upset. Here's the thing. I've gone to several restaurants. I've gone to the fast food and I've gone to the nice restaurants. And there are all sorts of little tips and tricks that they're using on their menus to suggest to me that everything there has a cost. I'm going to break it down for you because this tip or this trick is really easy. At the end of a paragraph, a description of what they have as food, it's a dotted line, and then at the end there's a price and another price and another price, and you turn the back cover and it says sides, and there's a whole list of them, and there's prices. It's a big trick, right? Because what they're doing is they're anchoring you on the fact that everything you look at on the menu has a price. Guess what? Everything that you do has a price. So just prep the customer better. I understand that if you're, 20 weeks into a project and they ask for something, it can feel frustrating because you thought you were just a week away from being done. And now maybe they've gone and added it to make it 2 or 3 or 5 weeks longer. I understand there's a level of frustration that comes with, that specialized order. Just like I assume, right, that if you're Bon Qui Qui and you're at, the counter and someone comes with a complicated order, that you're going to get a bit upset. If you don't know what I referenced right there, go look up Bon Qui Qui complicated order. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter that you get upset at that moment because you're in the customer service business. And maybe that's the most important thing to understand. When customers hire you, they're hiring you in the customer service business. It doesn't even matter if you sell a product. You're still in the service business. Your service may be very short-lived. The delivery of said product for an amount of money. Or maybe the answering of a question before or after a sales transaction. But it's all about service, and how we deliver our services suggest how professional we are. I've been to countless restaurants where I've asked for special orders because I'm picky. And when I do, what I've discovered is the fancier the restaurant, the more latitude I get. The freedom that they'll say, yeah, no, I'll say, I'll pay extra. They're like, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. Right? Don't you want to be that kind of person that just says, well, let me look at it. There may be a charge, there may not be. Again, you're going to say, but Chris, they get mad every time I talk about the price changing. Well, how did you pitch it at the front end? How did you interact with the customer at the front end? Right? When I go to a fancy restaurant, they have all these other signs that are giving me the cue that says this is a nice establishment and it might be expensive. Like there's a plaque on the side of the wall at a restaurant I went at recently, and it says, dress code applied. And you're like, whoa, I haven't been to one of those in a long time. I was wearing a shirt with a collar, so I hoped that was enough of the dress code. But it's a sign that this may be a nice place. You walk into the restaurant and there's a guy playing the piano in the back. They're paying him to do that. And you think, oh, if they're spending money on that, they got to make it up somewhere, so this is probably going to be a bit pricey. There's tablecloths on the tables. That gives you a hint that this may be a nice place. In fact, there's not just one waiter per table. There's a guy that brings the water, there's a guy that brings the food, and there's another guy that comes over and just checks to see how you're doing. Or maybe there's another guy that comes over and sees what wine you want. And it's giving you a hint that this is a nice restaurant. So guess what? At the end of all that, when the bill shows up, oh, and by the way, we already talked about the menu, right? So if the menu's there and you're good to go, at this point, when the bill shows up, it shouldn't be a shock that you're like, oh my God, it's $100 for dinner. Or $400 or $1,000. You shouldn't be surprised because you got all the cues. So let me ask you this question. What cues are you giving people at the front end of that relationship that suggest that you're a professional? That suggest that you charge a serious wage? That suggest that, yeah, they can ask for changes and you're willing to talk about it, but there'll be an extra charge. Or are you pitching for the low price leader, the sure I can get that done, the, oh, we can do this in a week for under $1,000, we can get it, we can slide this by, we can get this done, we can reuse that. And if everything you're saying is we're at a fast food place, then yes, when someone says, can I get an extra barbecue sauce? And you're like, that'll be $43, someone might actually throw a fit. But it's all about how you prep the conversation. It's all about how you set up the relationship and the cues you give to people up front. I hope that makes sense, right? Because we should be embracing scope creep. We should be embracing anytime a customer is willing to articulate for us an additional need they have. Anytime they're saying, I have this other problem, but I've gone to other people and they won't do it, or there's a feature I need for this plugin, but it doesn't do it, and you're like, that's no problem. Of course I can help. They're telling you they want to get closer in relationship. They're telling you they want to build something together, to collaborate on something that no one else has done. And your option at that moment is to either embrace it and go with it and maximize the revenue potential from it, or to throw a fit and look like a petulant child. Why would you choose that? Ever? That wouldn't make any sense. So your best bet, right? I said this before. Someone says, hey, I've changed my mind, right? I want more stuff. And I say, hey, great, I'm going to charge you more money. It's that simple. And if you've built the right rapport, if you've built the right partnership, if you've built the right relationship, if you've given them the right cues, then when you say, okay, I'll have to look into that, but there may be an extra charge, customers will be prepped for that and know and say, okay. Now, the reality is there are many segments in the world. And if you're going for the low price leader, this does not apply to you. But if you're playing in the middle to the higher segments of the market, it does and it should apply to you. If you're doing projects under $500, there's a good chance your customer doesn't want a change order. They don't even understand a change order. In fact, I've said this before, if you're working with a customer who's paying for, a custom plugin or a totally custom theme, and they're paying $300, $400, they're not actually paying you for your work. You should understand this, right? They're paying you to have your phone number for the rest of their lives, and they believe that they can call you forever. I have a problem with Outlook. I'll just call my web guy. I have a problem getting an email. This isn't working. I'll just call my web guy. That's the trade-off they're making, and you don't realize it. You gave me your number once. It's why I changed my phone number, right? I used to be in that place. I've been there. But I moved from Northern California to Southern California, and they said, AT&T said, well, we can keep your same line. I'm like, no, feel free to give me a brand new number. Not that I want to hide from people, but I want to make it a little bit harder for some of those folks in the early days, years ago, 8, 9, 10 years ago, where I did work for $300-$500, and they called me for everything. They were like, okay, build my website and set up my Outlooks and install Office on all my computers and build out my LAN and make sure my router's working. And you're like, oh my God, this is insane. We've all been there, I get it. And it's easy to fall into the trap of just thinking scope creep is bad. Hopefully what I've tried to do is challenge you a little bit to think through that in our day-to-day experiences, we don't see it as bad, except in this one context. And so my challenge to you today, right, is embrace it. Embrace scope creep. Embrace it as a way to deliver better service, because at the end of the day, we're all in the customer service business. Thanks.